So, how would going on from there? How would you say your work is evolving, or do you have any kind of sense of a direction that you might be going in the
Yeah,
future?
well, it's interesting. I was just teaching actually this morning a landscape class out in Rock Creek Park in Washington, D.C., and for the Corcoran. And I was talking to a student about, sort of what your work does through your lifetime is so interesting, especially, when you have enough, you've put in enough time that you can kind of stand back and see where it's gone.
Sure.
It's always hard to, when you're in the moment, to see where you are, but when you can get a little perspective. And I started out really as a landscape painter because, as I mentioned before, my uncle was a landscape painter, and I used to live with him in the summers in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. So I really cut my teeth on landscape. And then when I was a young artist, I went to Italy for the first time, and I was just literally
I'll bet.
just stunned by the fresco paintings, both the frescoes and the predellas, the little narrative paintings of the lives of the saints that are below the altarpieces.
Yes.
And after that trip, I just decided, I'm a figure painter. I need to paint figures because I need to tell stories. So I did a big flip then, and really, I still had landscape and architectural elements, but the figures really began to dominate, and I would paint multiple, sort of compositions with many figures and lots of things going on. And then in the past few years, I've sort of kind of gone back a little bit, or the figures are sort of diminishing to an extent, and the landscape in the interior is sort of dominating the mood, and the figure is almost playing a secondary, or not really a secondary role, but it's not as dominant as they were for a while. So I've kind of, so I would say that, and I'm really involved with that right now, with these, especially with the sort of interior and exterior spaces kind of merging, and
That's interesting.
figure. Yeah.
It makes me think while I'm listening to you. I'm thinking, it sounds almost like going to fundamentals. Like after all, we all came out of a landscape, right? Where the landscape was there first, and the figures, the people, that's sort of secondary. So it's almost like going down to the fundamentals to find out where all this started.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not sure then where I'm going to go from that, but I don't know, my work has always just kind of, my work, I haven't ever made huge changes. Throughout my career, it's always kind of been, my work. And so it's evolved in a much probably slower, very gradual kind of way than I've never made a conscious decision really, I'm going to change this up, or, it just sort of happens. I get interested in a certain idea, and as I work on it, it's, just the sort of emphasis changes, I guess.
I guess the obvious love you have for particular media, that kind of guides what you do with the media, right? If you're going to start with that, and you know that, then the media kind of becomes the base on which the ideas form in some way.
Right, yeah, that can happen too. So I would say that's generally kind of what's going on. I'm not sure right at this point. I have certain paintings. I kind of think almost a year out in terms of the various. I have lists lists of stories, of ideas for paintings, and I keep them in this book. And then I think, I think I'm going to work on this for a while. So I kind of know almost a year out what I'm working on.
Anybody who visited your website would have to say you certainly aren't short of ideas. You have.
That's funny. But I have a show coming up in one in November in Charleston, South Carolina, and then one in January here in D.C. with Jane Haslam Gallery, and it's going to be the first time I haven't decided for sure, but a lot of times when I'm working on paintings, I always also write poems. I guess I'm going to use that term loosely, but sort of little narratives that go with the paintings, and they go. It's sort of I work on the painting and I work on the poem at the same time, and one kind of informs the other in a strange way. But I've never exhibited them with my work, and I'm toying with the idea of doing that for the first time this year, especially with these woods. I call it Stories from the Woods, this group of paintings.
Sure. So, I think that would add a lot.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see if I'm courageous enough to do that.
That's wonderful.